Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This week we are reading the final two portions, a double portion of the book of Numbers. And it has been a journey through this time of quarantining and social isolation. We have actually journeyed through an entire book of the Torah, the book of Numbers, plus, of course, a significant portion of the previous book, Leviticus. So we too are on a journey, and um, journeys have markers, journeys have signposts, journeys have travel stories. And one of the things that we often skip over in reading our Torah portions these days, because they frankly seem kind of boring to us, are lists. But in the Torah portion this week, in the second half of Mattot-Mas'e, we have a list of all the places where the Israelites have camped during their 40 years in the wilderness. And so we know that this journey is coming to an end. And this is a recap where all of the places that they have been. Well, there are lots of other very interesting and informative and important moral messages and lessons about identity all through this double portion, and some very challenging sections as well. So, of course, we kind of like to skip over some of the more mundane, but I want to mention this list in um, in Parshat Mas'e, because there really is some significance that we can glean from it and a larger message. And as you know, sometimes I like to focus on a very tiny detail, a particular word, even in a Torah portion. And sometimes I find it very helpful to take a step back and look at the larger piece, the larger picture, and how some of those pieces fit together. And I'm helped this week by a commentary by Rabbi Peter Haas, who is a professor emeritus at Case Western Reserve University. And um, he points out that there really is a purpose for listing these cities, that this is not about where specifically they camped, but it is about the journey. That along this journey, there have been places where they stopped for a brief period of time and places where they were probably encamped for years. Our lives do not proceed at an even pace. Our lives as individuals, our lives as a community, indeed, the life of the entire Jewish people. We do have stops and starts. We are stuck sometimes. Sometimes we move rather quickly. And that this journey and the enumeration of all these places is indicative of the experience of learning how to be a people, of learning how to take responsibility, of stumbling and suffering the consequences. If you think about traveling anywhere and you look off into the distance and you see something interesting, well, sometimes that leads you to a wonderful detour and an adventure in the serendipity of discovery. And sometimes you better watch out for that ditch. And this is, in a way, the story of these 40 years in the wilderness, and that the journey represents growth and learning, moral learning, but also social learning, how to be a free people, how to be responsible, how to plan and organize so that when they arrive at their destination, they will have the skills and the understanding to do what is needed to be done to actually settle and become not just a sovereign society, but a healthy and well functioning society. And so I think this is a very useful list. Um, there is a midrash that tells us that another reason for this list is to remind the people specifically of adventures they encounter and lessons that they learned, both lessons in God's grace and mercy and God's support for them, but also lessons that they learned through their own stiff necked, recalcitrant, stubborn refusal to pay attention to God, to Moses, to pay attention to the mission of liberation. And so this is um, a time when a mundane list really calls our attention. This is about personal growth, it is about communal growth. It is recognizing that the Israelites did not go from an enslaved people to a sovereign, independent, functioning nation in one step. And neither do we as we grow up, as we find our way into the world, as we learn how to get along, how to navigate our society, but also how to influence the people around us for good. The phrase tikkun olam, repairing the world, really is a phrase about learning to see what is in front of you, to see it on the surface and to see below the surface, to see what needs to be done, and to act to do it. The Israelites, when they leave Egypt, have no agency. They are really passive and at the mercy of the whims of Pharaoh. They have to learn to take hold of their own reins. They have to learn that their shoes do have those, what we call today, bootstraps, that they can help each other to pull on those bootstraps and stand up, to help each other achieve peace, justice, compassion, to learn what those things are, independent of who is at the head of government, and to hold people who are their leaders accountable for those values. They have to learn what to do, how to make sacrifices in order to serve God, how and when, what are the rituals, what are the customs, how to celebrate, what the festivals can be, when they should be, how to mourn, how to support each other in sorrow as well as in joy. These are all steps on a journey that is really more important than the ultimate destination. And even though the ultimate destination is a promise, the promised land of Canaan, or in Hebrew, Canaan, the promised land of a free society, the promised land of autonomy, it is not achievable. None of those are achievable without the journey, without the learning that accompanies experience. And it reminds me very much of a poem that we often read in times of mourning as a way to sum up a life and find perspective. And we find it in our prayer book. And it begins: birth is a beginning and death a destination. And life is a journey from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. And we hope back again to strength. From health to sickness and back, we pray, especially these days, for health again, from offense to forgiveness and loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until, looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage. This is the story of a life, but this is also the story of our people. And when we come to the end of a book of Torah, we say, Chazak, Chazak, Benit Chazek, be strong, and we shall all be strengthened. And I want to note that the word Chazak is in the singular. If each one of us is strong, we can be strong together and strengthen each other and make our journey one of ultimate success as we reach a place of wholeness, of health, of peace, of community, an identity that is richly attained and we hope fully enjoyed. Shabbat Shalom.